Welcome back to Cybersecurity for Everyone. I'm Dr. Charles Harry. We've been talking about in the last module all about the hacking process. And at the end of that process were the actions that the hacker or the threat actor has on target. And in this particular module, I want to focus on how we talk about effects. Specifically, how do we frame these effects? So we know that threat actors are motivated to exploit vulnerabilities in systems to achieve an effect. And that motivation stems from financial purpose, nationalist, reputational, or even activism. They exploit vulnerabilities and utilize tradecraft to position themselves in the right location in your network. They use the hacking process, and through that, they conduct reconnaissance, deliver exploits, and control access to the malwares in your network. And then they execute intended, sometimes unintended, effects. So what kind of effect is achieved? Is this a private problem for the organization, or is this a broader public concern? So remember, in our last episode, we talked specifically about the range of effects and how they're sometimes difficult to characterize. You can have effects on IT systems where there's a direct interaction between the hacker and the specific devices. They can have data stolen, or they can make devices inoperable. And those effects can be measured in terms of amount of data loss or impacts to productivity. But that's not the only type of effect, because the impact on those specific devices can cascade to broader effects across the enterprise. And specifically, the devices that are impacted affect human processes, things like payroll or the ability to manufacture a product or a service. And so those human processes that support the organizational goals can also be disrupted. And those effects can be measured in terms of revenue lost, remediation costs, impacts to market capitalization, or even brand effect. And then there's the broader effects on society. So as organizations fail, they can impact other organizations or individuals. And those impacts could be physical, economic, or behavioral in nature. So what kind of effect do hackers generate? We have the entire hacking process from reconnaissance to actions on target, but those actions on target lead to this ecosystem of end effects at the IT system level, at the enterprise level, or even at society. So not all cyber attacks then generate the same type and severity of effect. Some cyber attacks are going to generate large impacts on specific targeted systems, but have no discernible effect on the enterprise's operations. Other cyber attacks might not impact many computers, but might cripple an organization's ability to function. Some might even cause profound impacts on other businesses or society at large. So the question then becomes, how can we frame and further analyze cyber effects? Well, one way to really think more broadly about this problem is to start to characterize these different effects in different groupings. And so we can use what are called primary effects, where these are the impacts on the directly targeted systems, and differentiate that from what we would call secondary effects, which are the impacts on organizational processes and capability, and further distinguish that from second order effects, where the impacts on broader society. And depending on what type of effect you're talking about, each category is going to be measured differently. So different attacks provide different effects. Defacement of a website where the content is modified, but files are quickly restored, maybe in perhaps as few as 30 minutes, really is probably not going to directly impact your ability to, let's say, manufacture tires. So the cyber attack on something like defacing a website, the effect is primarily going to have primary and localized effects on the IT systems that were attacked. But that might be completely different than ransomware being deployed on an assembly line, where devices that are controlling the manufacturing line are made completely inoperable for 72 hours. There's no manufacturing that's able to take place during that period of time. And so the cyber attack creates primary, secondary, and maybe even second order effects because other firms that are reliant on those manufactured tires, like a car manufacturer, may have difficulty meeting their own obligations. So what are some of the takeaways? Well, cyber attacks can generate a range of effects. And while some attacks only affect the targeted machines, others can create larger emergent impacts. And it's useful to categorize these effects as primary, secondary, or second order effects or impacts. In our next episode, we're going to explore primary effects. I hope to see you next time.